has been a collaborative approach, but he also said there has been a consensus in the House on the issue of the Leaving Cert. That is not correct. There is no consensus in this House on the issue of the Leaving Cert. Solidarity, along with People Before Profit, does not agree with your position on the Leaving Cert. We think that the Leaving Cert should be cancelled. And I'm going to give you 10 reasons why the Leaving Cert this year should be cancelled. First of all, the students haven't had classes in their schools for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. What kind of preparation is that? Second of all, many students are in homes with no devices. Others are in homes with a shortage of devices. Reason number 3, how many students trying to prep away from their school are in areas that do not have broadband or do not have good quality broadband? Reason number 4, students have been denied access to their schools, denied access to their libraries, have been forced to study at home. Many of those homes are overcrowded. Some of them are seriously overcrowded. Leave aside the young people in direct provision. Leave aside the young travellers. Leave aside the young people who are homeless. There are many others in overcrowded conditions as well. Reason number 5, students prepared for an exam with an idea of where the finishing line would be. It's being extended, not by a couple of days, not by a couple of weeks, but the best part of 2 months. Anxiety in the exam hall. The exam halls will not be empty, they will not be nearly empty. You'll make them as safe, and the teachers will make them as safe as you possibly can. They may even be as safe as could possibly be. But a student who's anxious, who goes in, sitting on a desk, sitting on a chair at a desk with a paper in front of them, will feel anxiety. Many of them will feel anxiety about the COVID situation, even in the exam hall, irrespective of how safe you make it with social distancing. How many children will be sitting this exam, reason number 8, who are themselves children in homes that have the extra stress of a parent or parents being frontline workers? Reason number 9, how many students will be studying the exams who will have gone through the trauma of a family member having been hospitalised from COVID in the run-up to the exams? And how many young people will be sitting the exams with a member of their family having died as a result of the disease in the run-up to the exams? And all of this runs up to reason number 10, which is the key overarching reason, is the question of mental health. The reports that I'm getting back, and from what I'm picking up from this debate, what lots of other deputies are getting back as well, is that students are telling us, and teachers are telling us, that stress levels aren't just increasing a little bit here, they are in many cases going through the roof. And you said, Minister, and I quote you, in the debate earlier on, that the health and the well-being of students will be at the heart of any decision I make. I don't see how you can say that when the big majority of students are in favour of the cancellation of this Leaving Cert. That's the evidence that we see all around us. I mean, I'm sure in most years there's some students who would say, yeah, I'll put my hand up, cancel the Leaving Cert. But it's not that few this time around. It's a big majority, including many of the most conscientious students who see the mental health pressure on their friends. And I just don't see how, Minister, you can give me or anyone else for that matter any kind of real guarantee that the mental health pressures that this is putting on young people will not have very serious consequences. I don't see how that guarantee can be given, and we shouldn't take risk with things like this. Since I've come into this House, I've heard many speeches about the importance of mental health, about the importance of mental health for young people. I'll be honest with you, I think it's pious hypocrisy, Minister, if you drive on regardless with this Leaving Cert. Now, I'm asked the question back, well, what's your alternative? And oftentimes that is a good question, but it's not always, the kingpin question. Sometimes something is so much of a mistake in and of itself that you don't need to fully answer that question. But where there's a will, there's a way. We can learn from other countries. We can give every student the Leaving Cert, and we can increase state investment in such a way that there is a place in third level next year for every student who would want it, and find various mechanisms by which you would allocate it as to whether it would be the student's first preference, second preference, or perhaps the third preference. The final point that I would make, this is also about respect at this stage. The greatest way that, yes, I understand, the greatest way in which you can disrespect any person is by forcing them to do something which they really, really do not want to do. And I think that that is what you're doing with the majority of the students who are facing in to the Leaving Cert in the period ahead. So my question is, will you cancel the exam?
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, there's only 1 minute and 17 seconds.
Okay.
With reply to two questions.
The plan that we're working on at the moment is to have the Leaving Cert this year. It's been postponed. I do take the points in relation to the pressure and the anxiety. And that's why I did say earlier on that central to any decision will be the health and mental health and well-being of every single of those 61,000 young people in this year's Leaving Cert. And that's why we're putting the support systems in place. However, there is international evidence of different countries doing different things, and we're monitoring that. And we're looking at the different practices. And central to every single decision that we've made since the pandemic became a massive issue is ensuring that we will be guided by public health officials. And I am informing myself, and whether that's direct contact with Tony Holohan, whether that's direct contact with any other health expert, including, as recent of today, Dr. Mike Ryan from the World Health Organization. I had a 15-minute conversation with him, because I am taking this seriously, because I am getting the same emails as you are in terms of the pressure that young people are under, but I'm also getting the emails and the messages from young people who are studying hard, getting the online courses, who are using technology, and teachers being innovative and staying in touch with their students. And this is different. And I don't have time to go through every your point. I don't think it'd be fair on you to say that to negate every single one of your point. But just taking your first point, you're saying because Leaving Certs have lost out in a number of weeks of teaching, of classroom teaching, we should cancel the Leaving Cert. Well, that same argument could be made for the 2021 class, because they're losing out on class time as well. So these are the scenarios we're working with. But central to any decision, absolutely central to any decision, will be the health and well-being of these students. And we will work now with the advisory group, Deputy. And it's the advisory group who has to look at the practicalities, look at the health advice, and look to see, can this work? And that's what we'll work through over the next couple of weeks.
Minister,
Hi, this is Mick Barry, TD here. Pressure is rising for the cancellation of this year's Leaving Cert exams. The views and the opinions of 61,000 Leaving Cert students right across the country are beginning to make themselves felt. Over the weekend, under pressure from young people, Fianna Fáil changed their position on this issue. But the caretaker government are still trying desperately to hold the line, ignoring the views of young people, bullying young people in fact, and adding greatly to the growing mental health pressures here. Now is the time to increase the pressure on the government. We can get these exams cancelled. I will be organising an online rally for Leaving Cert students this Wednesday at 6 o'clock. If you like my Mick Barry TD Facebook page, you can be notified as to when the Facebook Live begins. Alternatively, you can click join on the Facebook event that I have created and that is advertised on my page. The rally will also be live streamed on YouTube. Let your friends who don't have Facebook know that I will be sharing the YouTube link on Instagram and Twitter. Stay safe. See you at the rally on Wednesday. has been a collaborative approach, but he also said there has been a consensus in the House on the issue of the Leaving Cert. That is not correct. There is no consensus in this House on the issue of the Leaving Cert. Solidarity, along with People Before Profit, does not agree with your position on the Leaving Cert. We think that the Leaving Cert should be cancelled. And I'm going to give you 10 reasons why the Leaving Cert this year should be cancelled. First of all, the students haven't had classes in their schools for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. What kind of preparation is that? Second of all, many students are in homes with no devices. Others are in homes with a shortage of devices. Reason number 3, how many students trying to prep away from their school are in areas that do not have broadband or do not have good quality broadband? Reason number 4, students have been denied access to their schools, denied access to their libraries, have been forced to study at home. Many of those homes are overcrowded. Some of them are seriously overcrowded. Leave aside the young people in direct provision. Leave aside the young travellers. Leave aside the young people who are homeless. There are many others in overcrowded conditions as well. Reason number 5, students prepared for an exam with an idea of where the finishing line would be. It's being extended, not by a couple of days, not by a couple of weeks, but the best part of 2 months. Anxiety in the exam hall. The exam halls will not be empty, they will not be nearly empty. You'll make them as safe, and the teachers will make them as safe as you possibly can. They may even be as safe as could possibly be. But a student who's anxious, who goes in, sitting on a desk, sitting on a chair at a desk with a paper in front of them, will feel anxiety. Many of them will feel anxiety about the COVID situation, even in the exam hall, irrespective of how safe you make it with social distancing. How many children will be sitting this exam, reason number 8, who are themselves children in homes that have the extra stress of a parent or parents being frontline workers? Reason number 9, how many students will be studying the exams who will have gone through the trauma of a family member having been hospitalised from COVID in the run-up to the exams? And how many young people will be sitting the exams with a member of their family having died as a result of the disease in the run-up to the exams? And all of this runs up to reason number 10, which is the key overarching reason, is the question of mental health. The reports that I'm getting back, and from what I'm picking up from this debate, what lots of other deputies are getting back as well, is that students are telling us, and teachers are telling us, that stress levels aren't just increasing a little bit here, they are in many cases going through the roof. And you said, Minister, and I quote you, in the debate earlier on, that the health and the well-being of students will be at the heart of any decision I make. I don't see how you can say that when the big majority of students are in favour of the cancellation of this Leaving Cert. That's the evidence that we see all around us. I mean, I'm sure in most years there's some students who would say, yeah, I'll put my hand up, cancel the Leaving Cert. But it's not that few this time around. It's a big majority, including many of the most conscientious students who see the mental health pressure on their friends. And I just don't see how, Minister, you can give me or anyone else for that matter any kind of real guarantee that the mental health pressures that this is putting on young people will not have very serious consequences. I don't see how that guarantee can be given, and we shouldn't take risk with things like this. Since I've come into this House, I've heard many speeches about the importance of mental health, about the importance of mental health for young people. I'll be honest with you, I think it's pious hypocrisy, Minister, if you drive on regardless with this Leaving Cert. Now, I'm asked the question back, well, what's your alternative? And oftentimes that is a good question, but it's not always, the kingpin question. Sometimes something is so much of a mistake in and of itself that you don't need to fully answer that question. But where there's a will, there's a way. We can learn from other countries. We can give every student the Leaving Cert, and we can increase state investment in such a way that there is a place in third level next year for every student who would want it, and find various mechanisms by which you would allocate it as to whether it would be the student's first preference, second preference, or perhaps the third preference. The final point that I would make, this is also about respect at this stage. The greatest way that, yes, I understand, the greatest way in which you can disrespect any person is by forcing them to do something which they really, really do not want to do. And I think that that is what you're doing with the majority of the students who are facing in to the Leaving Cert in the period ahead. So my question is, will you cancel the exam?
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, there's only 1 minute and 17 seconds.
Okay.
For reply to two questions.
The plan that we're working on at the moment is to have the Leaving Cert this year. It's been postponed. I do take the points in relation to the pressure and the anxiety, and that's why I did say earlier on that central to any decision will be the health and mental health and well-being of every single of those 61,000 young people in this year's Leaving Cert, and that's why we're putting the support systems in place. However, there is international evidence of different countries doing different things, and we're monitoring that, and we're looking at the different practices. And central to every single decision that we've made since the pandemic became a massive issue is ensuring that we will be guided by public health officials. And I am informing myself, and whether that's direct contact with Tony Holohan, whether that's direct contact with any other health expert, including, as recent of today, Dr. Mike Ryan from the World Health Organization. I had a 15-minute conversation with him, because I am taking this seriously, because I am getting the same emails as you are in terms of the pressure that young people are under, but I'm also getting the emails and the messages from young people who are studying hard, getting the online courses, who are using technology, and teachers being innovative and staying in touch with their students. And this is different. I don't have time to go through every your point. I don't think it'd be fair on you to say that to negate every single one of your point. But just taking your first point, you're saying because Leaving Certs have lost out in a number of weeks of teaching, of classroom teaching, we should cancel the Leaving Cert. Well, that same argument could be made for the 2021 class, because they're losing out on class time as well. So these are the scenarios we're working with, but central to any decision, absolutely central to any decision, will be the health and well-being of these students, and we will work now with the advisory group, Deputy, and it's the advisory group who has to look at the practicalities, look at the health advice, and look to see, can this work, and that's what we'll work through over the next couple of weeks.
Minister,
Hi, this is Mick Barry, TD here. Pressure is rising for the cancellation of this year's Leaving Cert exams. The views and the opinions of 61,000 Leaving Cert students right across the country are beginning to make themselves felt. Over the weekend, under pressure from young people, Fianna Fáil changed their position on this issue. But the caretaker government are still trying desperately to hold the line, ignoring the views of young people, bullying young people in fact, and adding greatly to the growing mental health pressures here. Now is the time to increase the pressure on the government. We can get these exams cancelled. I will be organising an online rally for Leaving Cert students this Wednesday at 6 o'clock. If you like my Mick Barry TD Facebook page, you can be notified as to when the Facebook Live begins. Alternatively, you can click join on the Facebook event that I have created and that is advertised on my page. The rally will also be live streamed on YouTube. Let your friends who don't have Facebook know that I will be sharing the YouTube link on Instagram and Twitter. Stay safe. See you at the rally on Wednesday.
Go ahead, Mick.
How you doing? This is Mick Barry, TD here. I'd like to welcome you all to this Cancel the Leaving Cert meeting. I hope you're all safe and I hope you're all well. I am not going to speak right now. I'll be on in a little while. But first, I've invited 2 school students and a mental health campaigner to say a few words first. And I have invited another school student, Sadie, to chair the meeting. So I'm going to hand you over to Sadie now, and I'll see you again in a little while. Okay, Sadie.
Hi, thanks very much, Mick. So hi everyone, my name is Sadie Heffernan. I'm a school student and a socialist activist. So I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to this rally in such a crucial time for 6th-year students. As the days go by, the stress on young people who may be forced to sit such a huge exam in such uncertain conditions is growing. And it's clear that the majority of students not only want the Leaving Cert to be cancelled, but actually need it to be cancelled for a whole number of reasons, with our well-being really being the core reason. And on the flip side, the idea of cancelling the Leaving Cert has gained huge momentum and has put increased pressure on the political parties, with Fianna Fáil saying that the exams should be cancelled just a few days ago. So there is potential to make this happen if we get organised with each other and with our classmates. And this campaign is open to everyone, so I would obviously urge everyone to sign up and get involved, so we can quickly organise actions and meetings and put more pressure on the political parties. So we have 4 excellent speakers at this rally tonight. First, we will have Micheál, who is a 6th-year student from Waterford, and she's going to be sharing some of her own experience as a student. And after Micheál, we'll have Shoni, who will be speaking about the mental health issues that really surround the Leaving Cert going ahead. And then we'll have Haritha, who's a socialist school student and activist, who will be giving more reasons as to why the Leaving Cert should be cancelled and how students can build a campaign to achieve that. And finally, we'll bring Mick Barry TD in, who will be speaking a bit more on how students have the power to really put pressure on the government to change the policy. So yeah, we'll bring our first speaker in, who is Micheál.
Thanks, Sadie. Hi, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Mick and everyone else involved for fighting for a fair alternative for this year's Leaving Cert. I'm just going to talk to you about my views, my own concerns, and what I feel is a good alternative for this year's Leaving Cert. So basically, like a lot of students in Ireland, I have someone in my family who's immune compromised. For me, it's my little brother. He's 13 and he has a rare brain malformation called pachygyria, which affects his speech and his movement. He also has epilepsy, a never seen before gene that's potassium based, and an eye disease that's attacking his immune system. There's no cure and they actually don't know what caused this condition. So he's in a very high risk category with this virus. I personally don't feel comfortable or confident enough to sit in an exam hall and perform to the best of my ability. No one knows when COVID-19 will end, and no one knows how safe it actually is to put us students in exam halls. Even with social distancing, it's insane and it's inhumane to expect us to sit in exam halls without us worrying about not only us bringing home the virus, but us contracting it to our friends, our families, and our neighbours. This in itself has created mind-blowing stress and anxiety on students. Another thing that amazes me is how disregarded the student voice has been by the government. We have and we still are trying to make our voices heard. Today, the second results for the ISSU survey came out, and again it proved that we would like the Leaving Cert cancelled. We aren't immune to stress. Just because we are 17, 18 and 19 years of age doesn't mean we aren't terrified of the consequences this virus is having. We're losing loved ones, we're losing friends, and we're missing our loved ones and our friends. Our minds are elsewhere and preoccupied with the effect this virus is having around the world. It's a complete joke to expect us to carry on studying as normal. We're surrounded by a global pandemic. Our studies have been disrupted. Many students don't have a suitable environment to study in. Many don't have resources such as good Wi-Fi or data to receive work from teachers. Others share laptops within their family or just use their phones because they don't have a laptop. Some have learning difficulties and aren't receiving the support that they need, and others have become full-time carers within their family, whether be it their parents are working from home, on the front line, or within essential services. It's a completely unlevel playing field to send us into exams and expect us to perform as well that we are capable of. It's unrealistic. I don't see how the department thinks these results will show our true abilities, and the talks of bringing us back to school for 2 weeks won't do us any good. We are not finished coursework, and we still have bunches of revision to do. We've missed up to 3 months of school, nearly 4 by the time that they say they want to bring us back for 2 weeks. We can't cram in unfinished coursework into 2 weeks. It's impossible. We'll be expected to cram and revise at the same time, and that won't work. It'll only create more anxiety and stress, and we already have enough of that. We're humans, we're not robots. It's impossible. These are just some of the concerns that we face before even entering the exam hall. When we do enter the exam hall, our concentration levels will be at an all-time low, and our stress and anxiety levels at a high. Fear will run through our minds even at the slightest sniffle due to the current circumstances, and unfortunately, they're unavoidable. Lastly, I'd really like to emphasize the devastating effect that this decision has had on our mental health, and it will continue to have on our mental health. Firstly, we've been left in a limbo with no clarity whatsoever. We have no structure, we have no timetable. We don't know when these exams will happen properly or what format they will take. We start 6th year, we work as hard as we can to peak in June and to finish in June. So the first thing you hear from your teachers that you will have the big Leaving Cert in June, work as hard as you can and you'll finish then. But now we've been told we have to keep going into July and August. It's very hard to stay motivated when you have nothing to work towards. This really creates a panic and uncertainty in students' minds. We've lost motivation and there doesn't seem to be an end when we have no clarity. Thoughts and worries are running through our head and they need to be stopped now. We can't keep going with no end in sight. It's exhausting. Like I said, we're human beings, we're not robots. We deserve better. I propose that we should be given our first or our second choice on the CAO. This way students can pursue their dream course and be happy in their dream course. Our stress, anxiety and fear will be eased, and the stress and anxiety on families can be stopped. Thanks, Sadie, and I'd like to hand it back over to you, and thanks everyone for listening to me.
Thanks very much, Nicole. You've highlighted excellent points and realities that a lot of families and students are struggling with, and how inhumane it will be to force us to go through with this. You've also highlighted the complete disregard of young people and the inability of the government, has to put our needs first. So thanks. Next, we'll bring in our second speaker, who is Shoni. She is a teacher and a campaigner in mental health issues with Limerick-based Stand Up for Mental Health campaign. She's going to be focused on, obviously, the mental health issues that fall into line with the Leaving Cert going ahead. So, yeah.
Hi, everybody. Hope you're all doing well, considering. I was just thinking back of when I was doing my Leaving Cert, and I was certainly depending on like support from peers and friends, and a lot of cramming obviously at the end. So I can't imagine, you know, what isolation sort of is doing for your stress levels. So solidarity to you all. I just want to clarify, I'm not a mental health expert by any means, but I'm an activist with the Stand Up for Mental Health Limerick campaign, which we started last year. Because of the spiralling mental health crisis, particularly among young people and vulnerable groups, the lack of action being taken at government level to address it, and the lack of services and supports available to people who are suffering, it's not acceptable. So our campaign is trying to put pressure on local and national government to increase funding, and really just to start taking it seriously, because they certainly aren't. And I think this whole sort of issue with the Leaving Cert is another shining example of the disregard being shown to mental health and, you know, to young people. So the attempt to bulldoze through with the Leaving Cert in the middle of a pandemic where anxiety levels are heightened already, and where there's a very real mental health crisis, is irresponsible and unfair of the Department of Education and the powers that be. I'm glad they're now discussing it, but disappointed that there didn't seem to be a mental health expert at today's meeting who could talk about the emotional stress of having the Leaving Cert in late July, and the stress that this would cause on students. Now, maybe I'm mistaken, but as far as I know, there was no sort of mental health group or anything at that meeting. So, you know, again, it shows that they don't quite understand the impact that this is having on Leaving Cert students. And the lack of empathy really for students, and it's sort of blatant disregard really. Just to give a bit of context on where we're at in the mental health crisis and how significant it is in the decision about the Leaving Cert, because the crisis very much involves, unfortunately, young people. So depression is the largest cause of disability among those aged between 10 and 24 years. And suicide is one of the leading causes of death among young people in Europe. Ireland ranks highest in Europe at 12%, with young people suffering from chronic depression. So, you know, that's a massive sort of blot on our government not to be sort of, you know, funding mental health services properly with those figures. Depression is an important predisposing factor for suicide among adolescents, and this age group has high rates of suicide in Ireland, unfortunately, with girls having the highest rate in Europe. And again, these are like adolescent girls we're talking about. Ireland also has very high rates of self-harm among adolescents. and the rates of mental illness are even higher in LGBT communities and other marginalised groups. So I suppose when we're talking here about mental health and the effect having the Leaving Cert in July will have on students, I think the impact it will have on more marginalised groups is going to be even more severe, you know, so that has to be a consideration as well, obviously. The fact that there are huge changes socially and mentally taking place leaves young people more susceptible to mental illness, and mental health issues that begin during adolescence can persist into adulthood. With over half of adults report that their mental health illnesses stemmed from the ages of 12 to 18, so school-going age. Over 50%, and I think that figure has gone up massively in the last day or two, of students said that their mental health suffered in the run-up to the Leaving Cert. Sorry, this was actually a survey done last year. So over 50% of students said that their mental health suffered in the run-up to the Leaving Cert last year. And so that was without, you know, them having to contend, obviously, with the madness that we're surrounded by, the pandemic, the isolation, the lack of peer support, you know, lack of teaching hours, etc., and the schools being closed. So you can imagine that that figure is after, you know, would take a massive leap and will be reflected in next year's survey. So the importance of mental health and well-being of students, to me, is really the single most important case for cancelling the Leaving Cert. Unfortunately, Fine Gael, going by their record of slashing mental health services, have no interest in doing what is best for young people's well-being, and they've a proven track record for that. So they do need to be put under pressure to do the right thing and to cancel the Leaving Cert as soon as possible. Our campaign is also has been fighting in the last year for the implementation of a mental health awareness programme to be put into all schools in Ireland, and that's actually it was recommended by the World Health Organization that we're hearing a lot about now. That was actually recommended by the World Health Organization a couple of years ago, and you know, still there's nothing being done about it. But well, there's no better group anyway. I just want to say young people have been at the fore of all really the major campaigns in recent years, such as repealing the 8th Amendment, and are very much central to action being taken on climate change and environmental issues. So our campaign, the Stand Up for Mental Health group, very much support your call to cancel the Leaving Cert, and will do whatever needs to be done to make sure that your voices are heard. I know school years can be one of the toughest times, and to plunge students into one of the most stressful exams is extremely unfair, in my opinion. It's an outdated exam anyway, and the system really needs to go. And I think there's been calls for many years now for it to be changed in some way to take the stress out of it, because really there's no need for it. So I'm hoping this pandemic will force change, which would be one positive thing about it, which will take a lot of the stress out of the Leaving Cert and make it a fairer system. So we've seen, for example, how, you know, things can radically change very fast. Our health system has turned into suddenly a one-tier public health system almost overnight when they said it couldn't be done. Homeless people have been given, you know, homes during the pandemic and that. So really, I think this should be sort of a call for years, the Leaving Cert. You know, there's been calls to change it, to make it a fairer, and just take the stress out of it, take the competition out of it. And so this is a great opportunity, I think, for young people to stand up and just say that's enough. You know, we want it cancelled, and in the future that there would be a fairer system put in place. So best of luck to you all. Thanks a million. Back to Sadie.
Thanks so much for that, Johnny. That was absolutely excellent. A point that I think is also worth mentioning, well, it's more of a statistic. It was a survey was conducted by StudyClicks in 2019, which showed that 75% of students experience extreme stress as a direct result of exams, with 28% suffering with depression. And when you put that, you know, that's just on an average year, and now you put that in the context of having a pressure of a global pandemic on top of that. And I think Shoni did a really great job of you know, exposing that and bringing those points to the forefront. And yeah, so we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Haritha. She is a member of Social Students Ireland, which is basically a group of young people building a movement to fight against the various inequalities that are created by capitalism, such as the climate crisis, fighting for LGBTQ plus rights, and obviously to cancel the Leaving Cert. So Haritha is a brilliant activist who played a brilliant role in the fight for abortion rights in Ireland and repeal, and she's going to talk a bit more on why we need to cancel the Leaving Cert and how students can build a campaign for mass funding into further education. So yeah, I'll bring it to Haritha.
Yeah, thanks Sadie so much. Nicole and Shoni excellently outlines the physical health risks and the mental health risks involved with holding a set of life-altering exams in the middle of a global pandemic, because unfortunately it is inevitable that a significant layer of students, whether they know it or not, will contract COVID-19 by the time the exams roll around. And not only will these students end up sitting their Leaving Cert while sick, which is very likely going to affect their performance, they'll pose a serious threat to the health of all students and all of the invigilators that they're stuck with for 3 hours in those exam rooms. So students will end up contracting COVID-19 during the exams, which not only poses questions on like how they'll be assessed with only half of their exams completed, this could also cause a spike in cases as the virus spreads to their friends and families, many of whom may be in high-risk groups, like in the case of Nicole. And just fundamentally, we are on an unequal playing field right now. Although a small number of students, fair enough, may be finding it really easy to cope with the pandemic, they may be breezing through their studies, this is simply just not the case for the vast majority of students. Some students will really sadly be grieving the loss of loved ones while studying for, or like worse, while sitting their exams. Young people in abusive households are maybe really struggling to focus at the moment without safe spaces like libraries and after school studies that would have been, accessible to them before the pandemic. Not all students have the adequate technology to fulfill their potential. Many of us are forced to stare at our phone screens for way more hours than we already are, just so that we can submit our assignments. And according to a survey carried out last month, 1 in 5 Irish secondary school students don't have access to a stable broadband connection, making it impossible for them to fully participate in their online education. And of course, it's extremely difficult for students living in emergency accommodation and for disabled students who no longer have the access to the support of their SNAs, and they are being disproportionately affected by this pandemic. So yeah, as Sadie mentioned, stealing the statistic from me, 75% of 6 years experience extreme stress during a normal exam year. So there are really just no words to describe the exacerbation of the stress and pressure by a global pandemic, which is why it's really crucial for us young people to demand real and truly fair change to the Leaving Cert system. The cancellation of the Leaving Cert this year alone is the most minimal concession, but we can and we must demand more. Predicted grading is extremely unfair. In the UK, where it has been used for a long time, only about 50% of grades are accurate, with marginalised groups being particularly affected by bias. Moreover, students that attend private schools and grinds are much more likely to have kept up a solid grade throughout, in their case, the A-levels, and here the senior cycle, whilst the many students that have to work alongside school, take care of younger siblings, or just are struggling with their mental health are often underestimated. These students often have to balance multiple responsibilities throughout 5th and 6th year, but can truly commit to the Leaving Cert after the Easter break to study and nail their grade. Having a system of predicted grading alongside the option to sit exams will just put an immense amount of pressure on students on teachers who not only will have to continue teaching content through a platform they're not used to, but will also have to assess students, which is something they've never had to assess students for predicted grades, which is something they've never had to do before. And of course, even if a smaller number of students sit the Leaving Cert, this is still a public health risk. Predicted grading simply will discriminate against working class, poor students and students with mental health issues. We really should be demanding the cancellation of all assessment and the mass funding of further education institutions to ensure that every student gets their first, second, or maybe third CAO choice. All students should also be issued a certificate for their completion of secondary education so they can apply to work if that's their chosen pathway. Broader college courses should be opened with examinations, if necessary, at the end of first year to determine entry into specific fields such as medicine or law if there is a huge oversubscription of places. To be honest, we really should be able to trust young people to make the right decisions for themselves. Not everyone is going to apply to really high points courses like medicine or engineering just because there is no points barrier. Anyone who applies to these courses will apply to them because they're interested in them, and they'll all be aware of how difficult they are and the huge workload that comes along with these subjects. And I do understand how this can sound utopian or unrealistic to some people, especially when we have grown up in a system that's always forced us to compete against one another to allocate college places. But the wealth does exist in society to fund this alternative. Ireland has one of the lowest spending rates on education in the EU, and our government has continuously refused to accept the now 15+ billion euro Apple tax, and our Department of Education gave up 23 million euro last year to improve facilities for greyhound racing, a form of animal abuse that should never be given precedence over our education. The government will continue to make these ludicrous decisions unless they are properly called out. It is hard to do this in lockdown when we are restricted to our screens, but we cannot let this pandemic just force us into silent submission. We all have the power to change the system. Mick Barry can speak for the Dáil and has been doing so excellently over the past few weeks, but real change to the system happens outside of the governmental structures. Movements like Repeal and the fight for water charges were both initiated by grassroots campaigns consisting of a small but fierce number of angered people demanding change who were really committed to fight and build their struggle until they became mass movements that won huge victories for working class and pregnant people in Ireland. Fianna Fáil have already changed their position on the Leaving Cert due to the immense amount of pressure being placed on them by young people. We must make sure that their call for cancellation isn't just fleeting populist statement, but a real demand to protect our mental health. So the next 2 weeks are going to be a really crucial time in this campaign. We are a huge force, but we really need to effectively organise in order to pressure the government to listen to our demands. There are 4 things all 5th and 6th year students listening to this call should be doing right away. Firstly, fill out the first Google form. It should be linked in the description if you're watching on YouTube, and it should be coming up in the comments now as well to get involved in our campaign. We are asking for your details just so that we can inform you about discussions and actions. Secondly, we have created a Facebook group called Cancel the Leaving Cert Now, Listen to Students to coordinate this campaign. All 5th and 6th year students and all of your friends and classmates should join this group. And even if you or your friends aren't on Facebook, I would really urge you to consider making an account just to join the group, just because unfortunately just Instagram and Snapchat and other social media platforms just don't have the flexibility of organizing groups like Facebook does in this regard. And thirdly, you should all create group chats on whatever social media platform is easiest for you for all the Leaving Cert students in your school. So here you can just kind of discuss with each other on the different actions you can take, and then you can create a Facebook group called Cancel the Leaving Cert Now, and then attach your school name at the end. And then if you post that Facebook group into the main group, then we can essentially create a huge network to organize discussions, maybe over Zoom, to on the national and local actions we can be taking. So these can include intervening in local and national press, and it can also include bombarding the social media of establishment politicians. Which brings me to our 4th point. Tomorrow at 4 p.m, we will be raiding Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, Minister for Education Joe McHugh, Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin, and Green Party leader Eamon Ryan with tweets and Instagram posts on the necessity to cancel the Leaving Cert and our alternative. So this is at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Greens will be discussing going to coalition tomorrow. So it is absolutely crucial that we bombard them with thousands of posts and tweets. Make sure to tag the TDs and use the hashtag Cancel the Leaving Cert. Hopefully we can put a lot of pressure on them this way. So then over the next week, we will hopefully be able to build a really mass campaign. This campaign will be constantly changing. So it is vital that we all join the Facebook group to keep updated. And then this day in 2 weeks, so that will be May 20th, we hope to convene an online assembly of student reps from every school to update on their actions and to make plans for the campaign moving forward. And honestly, this pandemic is really truly exposing the unjust and unfair roots of the Leaving Cert. It is a system that forces us to compete against one another for limited places in further education. The point system is not one that ranks courses in order of difficulty or one that quantifies students' intelligence. It simply fluctuates based on supply and demand. The education system should be adequately funded in the first place so that enough college places exist for every student to study what they're interested in. The Leaving Cert is a system that favours neurotypical middle-class students who are likely to have quiet study spaces and can attend private education. And I'm sure almost every past Leaving Cert student can attest to the fact that the Leaving Cert is nothing more than a memorization test. It's not a system that improves our cognition or teaches us the necessary values and life skills to foster good, ethical contributors to our society. It's simply an exam that forces students to memorize and regurgitate reams and reams of information only to forget it all a month later. It's a system that emphasizes competition and discipline in an attempt to churn out a generation of obedient, productive workers who will fulfill the demands of the bosses, the CEOs, the super rich, essentially the capitalist class. And it isn't easy to fight such a system, but through proper organization and discussion, it is definitely possible. One thing that has always helped me gain a better understanding of struggle is reading theory and discussing it with others. So as a bonus point for anyone who's interested, socialist students will be organizing a discussion on socialism and education sometime this week. There should be another Google form kind of popping up in the comments for anyone who wants to join in. This is separate to the first forum, but please feel free to sign up to both. That would be amazing. I'll just end with a quote in the words of the radical civil rights activist Assata Shakur: "No one will give you the education you need to overthrow them." But we can organize ourselves and we can educate ourselves to fight this rigged system. So thank you. Pass it on to Sadie now.
Thanks so much, Rita. You did a brilliant job there highlighting some really crucial points that may not be but are definitely causing a lot of suffering to students, and you really exposed how the nature of capitalism is mirrored in the Leaving Cert, and proposed a really good alternative for students to get their first and second CEO choices, and showed how it actually is possible, and really exposed that you know, by using the wealth of society we can do it. And you definitely gave me a real sense of faith and inspiration. I'm sure you did to a lot of other students, you know, and it kind of really gives that feeling that, you know, as students we do have the power. So just to like recap, you know, the 4 things we're proposing is there's a Google form in the chat to get involved and sign up, join the Facebook group Cancel the Leaving Cert, create a group chat for Leaving Cert students in your school, and then following that create a Facebook page and post it into the Facebook group. Participate in the Twitter stunt tomorrow, where we'll be bombarding politicians, Leo Varadkar, with our message. And then, you know, once you're in the group, there'll be updates on the student assembly. So we should bring our final speaker in now, Mick Barry TD. Mick Barry is a member of Solidarity Socialist Party. He actually joined the party when he was 17, so around the same age as Leaving Cert students. And he's been active in campaigns ever since, including the key role that's played by Solidarity in the anti-water charges campaign and ensuring abortion rights. So Mick's going to be emphasising that students do have the power to force the government into a change of policy. So I'll bring Mick in now.
Thanks, Sadie, and hi to everybody who's listening. It's nice to meet you, because you've been bombarding my Facebook page with messages for the last 10 days. I haven't had any peace, but I really appreciate getting those messages. I won't name people by name, but I have to thank the people who suggested that Joe McHugh should resign and that I should be the Minister for Education. I have to thank the people who said that I should be the President. A crazy suggestion, that. I have to thank the one school student from Galway who offered to marry me. And I especially have to thank the woman from, I think she was from Sligo, who brought me back down to earth, because it's very important that TDs keep their feet in the ground, and kept referring to me as the speech made by that baldy TD. So there you have it. So there's breaking news today. The 2 big pieces of news today is that the school students have spoken. The Irish School Student Union poll, which I think nearly 25,000 people participated in, stand to be corrected on that, showing 80% of Leaving Cert students wanting the exams cancelled. There's a basic issue here of democracy now. Are the government going to force people to do an exam when not just the majority, but the overwhelming majority of students do not want the exams to go ahead. Unfortunately, the other bit of news today is that the Minister, the top civil servants from the Department of Education, meeting with the teachers' reps, meeting with the schools' reps, while they have put in place a plan B in case the virus forces them to cancel the exams, their message tonight is put the date in your diary, July 29th. We are driving ahead with the Leaving Cert, despite the fact that they cannot give a guarantee to students that the Leaving Cert will definitely go ahead, because the virus may force them to change their plans. In fact, they can't even give a guarantee that if the exams start on the 29th, that by the middle of April or August, halfway through, that the virus wouldn't force them to change their plans. So it's up to us, it's up to ye to increase the pressure. And I think the proposals that have been put forward are very good proposals to try and increase the pressure on them. I want to make some points about that in a minute. When you think about school bullies, you think about a particular type or a particular kind of person. The group in your school that would rob you of your bar of chocolate. The group in your school who would try and steal your phone. But here's a question. Who are the biggest bullies of school students in the Irish education system today? I think they wear suits. I think they wear ties. I think they sit in Dáil Éireann. And I think they call themselves the government. Even though they were voted out, by the way, at the election in February, and really are only a caretaker government. Bullies always act in an unfair way, and the decision to drive on with the Leaving Cert it's just so unfair. Ye haven't been able to study in a school environment with direct contact with teachers for 2 months now, and you won't be able to do it for the best part of another 2 months yet. I know that many of you don't have devices in your homes or a shortage of devices in your homes. I know that there are students who don't have broadband or who certainly don't have good quality broadband. And I know that many of you have been forced to study away from schools, away from libraries, in homes that are overcrowded. Some of you have loved ones who have been hospitalized by this disease. Some of you have loved ones who have died from this disease. And the Minister and the government need to take into account that, you know, we talk about being in the middle of a global pandemic, but in this country, you know, the number of deaths per million people is the seventh highest in the entire world, right? And that's the reality that you are dealing with. Is there an alternative? Yeah, I think there is an alternative. I think everyone should get the cert. And by everyone, I include Leaving Cert applied students as well. I think the government have to step up and invest heavily in third level education and in apprenticeships, so that every one of you who wants a place next year can have your pick of third level, of PLC course, or of an apprenticeship. You may not all get your first choice, but if you don't, you should get your second choice. And there must be a fair and a just way that those places can be allocated, which are not based on students competing with one another. There's a variety of ways in which it could be done, and if there's a will, there's a way, and there should be a way. Now, I mentioned earlier that I got hundreds, maybe thousands of messages from you over the last 10 days. I apologise for not being able to reply personally to all of you. I think most, if not all of you, did get a reply, and I'd like to thank the team that sent the messages that have been helping me on that. But I did try and take some time out to read as many of the messages as I could. And one of the things that struck me from the messages that I read is that a lot of students felt powerless. They felt that they had no way to influence events. A lot of students said, at last, here's a TD who's fighting our corner. You're in the Dáil, you have the power, please use that power on our behalf. And I'm happy to do that, and I will continue to do that, and I give you a commitment tonight that I will do that. But what I want to say to you is this. You are not powerless in this situation. In fact, I think you've got a fair bit more power than perhaps many of you think that you do have. For example, the party which had the most number of TDs after the general election, just about, was the Fianna Fáil party. Now, in March, when Leo Varadkar addressed the nation and closed down the schools, what was Fianna Fáil's position? In March, Fianna Fáil were for the Leaving Cert. Must go ahead. Roll over into April. What was Fianna Fáil's position in April? In April, Fianna Fáil's position was, we support the Leaving Cert. The Leaving Cert must go ahead. In May, what was Fianna Fáil's position? Well, coming into May, Fianna Fáil changed their position, didn't they? Now, they said, we're against the Leaving Cert. We're for cancellation. So why? What happened? Why did they change their mind? Some people say it's because Mick Barry stood up and made a speech in the Dáil and had a real go at all of them. And maybe that had, you know, a small bit of an impact, but it's not the main reason. Not the main reason. The main reason is because there's 61,000 of you. You have family, you have friends, and you're putting it out there online that you are not happy with the situation, that there's a mental health crisis brewing here, and that the Leaving Cert should be cancelled. And whatever you say about these politicians, they're not all stupid. They have eyes, they have ears, and the message was beginning to come across to them. In other words, you put them under pressure. And the first party to buckle under that pressure was the Fianna Fáil party. So now we need to get some others. So let's have a look at that and how we're going to do that. Tomorrow is an important day in here. I'm doing this broadcast from the Dáil. So it's an important day in here tomorrow. The talks start tomorrow to form a government. There's three parties in on those talks. There's Fianna Fáil, there's Fine Gael, and there's the Green Party. So I think the suggestions that Harita and Sadie have made are very, very good suggestions. All right. The idea of doing a Twitter storm tomorrow at 4 o'clock and tagging Leo Varadkar, tagging Micheál Martin, and tagging Eamon Ryan with the hashtag cancel the Leaving Cert, that is an excellent idea, because what you're doing is you're hitting them with a message from all over the country on the day that they start the talks about setting up the new government. You're keeping Fianna Fáil under pressure, and you're placing new pressure on Fine Gael, and you're putting new pressure on the Greens. So I support that proposal very strongly. It is possible to change things. I was involved in the anti-water charges campaign, which forced the government to retreat on water charges a few years ago. I was part of the campaign to repeal the Eighth Amendment and to win abortion rights for women in Irish society. They said it couldn't be done, but change was won on that issue. I think the exams are still on, and for that reason, you have to keep studying. But I think at the same time that it may well be possible to force them to cancel these exams. And I would encourage you to keep the pressure on and to take the 4 steps that Sadie and that Haritha have urged you to take. And let's up the pressure on them this week. Let's up it again next week. And let's up it again the week after in the run-up to the assembly that has been proposed. I think it would be brilliant at that assembly if there could be representatives there from every school, or at least from the majority of schools in the country. So people power can win. Keep studying. The exams are still on, but keep the pressure on them and start with that Twitter storm tomorrow and get a group set up in your school. It's possible that you can win on this. They are under real pressure. Let's keep the pressure on them and stay in touch. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much there, Mick. So I'll just have a few closing points. So yeah, Mick made it very clear that 80% of students want the Leaving Cert to be cancelled. So that's a huge majority. And it really shows how, Fine Gael TDs actually don't really care. They're not the ones that are going to have to sit their Leaving Cert, and they have no idea what kind of mental impact this will have on students. And even still, there's such a level of anxiousness among students because we really don't know how this pandemic is going to play out, and we don't know what kind of conditions we'll be in July. So how can we trust that it even will be possible to go ahead in July? As well as that, working class students are the ones that are affected mostly by this. They may not necessarily have access to quiet study spaces. They've restricted access to technology to take part in these online classes and are not getting the full educational support they need and deserve. Not only has this rally really urged the need for the Leaving Cert to be cancelled this year, but it's also exposed the inequalities that lie in the point system. And it showed that it is quite outdated and maybe it's time for a change. Education is a right and should be accessible to all, and this is clear now more than ever. We hope that everyone, everyone's contributions and all the speakers' talks, gave inspiration to students, but I also hope that it possibly, has pushed students now to get involved more than ever and to put the pressure on the political parties. So I want to thank all the speakers for speaking brilliantly and everyone for tuning in, and make sure to follow all the links that are in the comments and get involved. Thanks.